Commitment Masterclass. We had really lots of fun the first session, so we're going to continue with our to be continued with our last few core values here. So last couple would be just jumping right in. One of them is we adjust as leaders. As leaders ourselves, we adjust personally to maximize the growth in our people, in the people that we're leading. So here's why that's a big deal for us, because typically what I find is that most leaders make sure that the team they're leading, the people they're leading, adjust to them, right? That is pretty typical, pretty par for the course in just about almost every organization, especially churches that we're a part of. The people serving in the church and the community have to adjust to their leader. Well, I don't think that necessarily is a bad thing. I don't think it's always the right thing to do, right? I mean, I don't know. You have kids. Do you guys have kids?
Yep.
Kids. So you would know as parents, you would know if you're a parent here that there's moments for your kids to adjust to you, right? And that's I joke about being Mexican all the time. That's a pretty Mexican way to manage things. It's like, hey, I'm the dad. This is how it's going to be. And there's moments for that. But I've learned from my wife, who's much better at this stuff than I am, is, oh no, it's our responsibility as parents to adjust to get the most out of our kid, right? And we have to actually do that as leaders and learn, what are we going to do? How are we going to adjust? If you're in an environment, I would just challenge you, if you're in an environment, if you lead an environment where you're being you all the time, and you're like, hey, I'm doing me, and everyone around me is managing me, I think that's a very poor way to lead. Often the people making the most adjustments are the leaders, because they're trying to maximize what's happening in their environment. And if I don't adjust to a Dave, which we shared some stories the last session, if I don't adjust to Dave and how he leads, or Haley and how she leads, I'm doing both of them a disservice, and I'm doing my environment a disservice, because I'm not allowing them to actually lead in their areas of strength, if that makes sense. So that for me is a big deal. As leaders, we adjust. We just don't require we require adjustment, yes, but that's not all that we do. We adjust. And then lastly, going along with that a little bit, kind of everything that we talked about is we play better when we win. That's a big deal. Haley reminded me of that core value. The reason why we do everything that we do is to get the most out of the people that we lead. I mean, really, that's what we want. We want to get the most out of who we lead, so that they can get God can use them the most. The presence shows up. Like we're geared toward all of those things. But people play better when they win. I've been on losing teams before. It's no fun. Gosh, my kids have played lots of sports. It's not fun. It's not fun to lose. It's more fun to win. And then winning becomes streaky, right? It's habitual. And so what we're trying to do really as we lead, as we create a culture and environment, we talked about the greenhouse, is we're creating a space where people get lots of wins, right? And we celebrate the wins. And I'm managing the space, or the individual rather, so they get the win. So I'm not putting up a leader who, for lack of a better metaphor, I'm going to say a lot of these. I'm so sorry, not really, but I'm going to say a ton of these kind of sports metaphors, because that's how I think, because that's the mode God has me in. I'm a parent and they play sports. I'm not putting my worst hitter first in the lineup. Like, I'm just not doing that, right? It's not fair. Not only is it not fair to the team, it's not fair to the hitter. I watch leaders do that, right? My brother-in-law went to lead worship at a church. This is, years and years and years ago. And he was leading worship, and the pastor, when he went there, asked, hey, will you lead with our worship team? And so he said, yeah, I mean, that's not typical, but I'll lead with your team. So he got up there to lead worship the first night, and they were horrible. I mean, horrible. No good. Like not just bad. Like, can't manage chords to songs bad,
And
right?
if you're watching back and you're on that team.
You're on that team. Jesus loves you. It was bad. And I remember him talking to the pastor. He said, I had to talk to the pastor, and I'm like, hey, is this your best team? And the pastor said, no, this is not our best team. I thought it would be great for them to, these are the people that they're really hungry, they're really developing. I thought it would be great if they could lead with you, because you're so gifted and you're so good. It would be awesome if they could just, be a part of that moment, and they would grow and develop too. That's a great heart. Can we just be clear about that? That's a phenomenal heart as a pastor. You want to put your people that maybe aren't as good up front to grow and develop. And so my brother-in-law said, okay, here's what we'll do. Do you preach tonight? Or tomorrow night you preach? And the guy goes, yeah, I preach. He goes, okay, I'll get in the sound booth. And when you preach, I'll turn your mic on and off. And I'll mess with the volume of your sound, and I'm gonna pan your voice right and left, and I'm just gonna screw you up, while you preach. And the guy goes, oh, is that what I did? And Brian said, yeah, that's exactly what you did. He goes, oh, I'll fix that. And the next day, Brian got the best musicians in that guy's church to come lead with him. With the best heart, that pastor put up the wrong people in the wrong situation and got a really bad result, right? Often we find with the best heart, sometimes we go, let them get a shot. And I'm like, oh, give them a shot in the right spot. Give them a shot in the right place. So when we talk about all the stuff we're talking about, a lot of it, because we all, we work in school, a lot of it pertains to School of Ministry, which, let's be clear, like that's not Sunday morning for us. You know what I mean? That's not a conference for us. So we have a lot of opportunity with, to give people lots of freedom. So we're going to give lots of shots in there, the moments we have in school, all of those things. Because we realize people just do play better when they win. They advance quicker when they win. And so giving them the right opportunity in the right place is often the best thing we can do to maximize growth. And as they develop, as they get better, man, we give them shots in bigger games, if that makes sense. And so, but we really work hard to get wins. And then I would say along with that, we celebrate wins. We try to do a good job. I'm not the best at it, to be really fair. Like I'm not great. So I surround myself with people that are really great. Haley's really great at it, about celebrating the wins, And the best thing I can liken it to is, we all had kids. So, when your little boy or girl first starts to walk, it's typical how it happens, right? There's a mom and there's a dad and the baby's in the middle, and the baby doesn't walk really. The baby kind of falls forward, right? And the legs move as the baby's falling, but that's not walking. I watch parents just celebrate, oh my gosh, you're amazing. And they scream and they jump and the baby's clapping and they're like, you did it, you did it. Did the baby do it? I mean, ish, kinda, maybe. You can kind of count it. The mom or the dad kind of pushed, Moms are going to go, yes, they did. They walked. And dads are going to go, oh, well, maybe-ish. We need to do more of that in our environment as we lead people. Do you know what I mean? Is like, yeah, you fell, but you fell forward. Look, we caught you. That's okay. That's all we wanted. We wanted you to do that. And as they get bigger, now if my 18-year-old's walking around the house that way, I'm like, find a doctor. Figure out what's going on with him. But we got to learn to celebrate the wins in our environment if we're going to actually want people, to engage with what we ask them to do.
Can I
Yeah, please.
I was just thinking of also how sometimes you can turn, and you've done this with me, turned a loss into a win, or made it even more. I can think of a time when you gave me a leadership opportunity a few years ago, and I gave it a great swing. I gave it the best swing, and when I imagined swinging in the shower, it felt so amazing. And then when I was swinging up there, I didn't feel how it felt in the shower. And sometimes I think as leaders, we can feel this pressure to go and go, no, that was amazing, or crush the person. And we sat down, and you went, how do you feel about that? And I was like, that was horrible. I don't know what happened. It wasn't like the shower. And you didn't lie to me and go, oh, no, it was amazing. You said, oh, it was okay, and we talked it through for a moment. But then 2 weeks later, I think, oh, I've blown it. 2 weeks later, after I know that you didn't think that was great either, 2 weeks later, Gabe says, hey, do you want to go for the exact same moment again? And that communicated to me such a belief and a willingness to back me that was almost more important than it had felt like a home run as well. So there is that piece there that I think is key.
No, that's key.
In feeling like you're winning on a team.
Yeah, I would love to say that I was such a good leader in that moment, but practically, honestly, we learned that from Bill and Chris. Chris a ton. I remember being on a Sunday. Part of our role is we lead different services at Bethel. Different leaders lead different services, and so I'm part of a team that helps to lead on a Sunday. Well, I remember Chris passed me once on the front row, which Bill and Chris were there, and he whispered in my ear a person's name, and he said, and we just had pre-service prayer, and I saw Chris talking to this individual at pre-service prayer, and Chris whispered to me on the front row, "Hey, I just tore into him. Make sure that he gets a shot tonight." And that leader would never know that that's what Chris did for him. But Chris made sure, hey, I discipline him, make sure tonight he gets a win on the big stage on a Sunday. That's Chris, right? And so we learned to do that on our small stages.
Yeah.
And Chris does it. That's kind of a core value. I say that because I think if you can learn to, like we talked about observation the first session, if you can learn to observe what your leaders are doing and how intentional they are in leading,
Yeah.
you'll begin to replicate that. So now I get a win with Dave. I mean, maybe I would have come up with that on my own. Maybe I would have saw the Lord. But the practical piece is I realize that, okay, we're gonna discipline somebody. We're gonna help to give feedback that might be a little bit rough. I'm gonna make sure on the back end that I have a plan to, get them back in the saddle, so to speak. So
Right.
that piece for me is a big deal. Well,
Just one quick, how often are we giving feedback? Like as a leader?
oh man, well we'll get there. How often? I would say I don't know. I don't know that there's a right answer. You might have a better answer for me. Here's what I would say: I give feedback as often as they can receive it, if that makes sense, or they need it. So there's two deals. I have an opportunity every time someone does something good or bad. Okay, so feedback is just whatever. Feedback's hard to give if it's neutral, right? So it's tough to give neutral feedback. But good or bad, I can give feedback. I have opportunities. I want to create more opportunities for the good than the bad. That should be consistent, right? Our feedback on good stuff should be more than the bad stuff, if we can help it. If we can help it, you know what I mean? On the bad piece, I'm looking at a couple things. I'm looking at now bad's relative, right? It's just growth feedback, but often it's hard to hear. So it's, can they hear what I'm trying to give them? That's the big question, right? And you have to assess that. So you have different leaders with different skill sets, with different emotional capacities. If you suck as a leader, then the way you give feedback often sucks the same way. And then you're like, well, people can't receive feedback. And I'm like, no, you're horrible at it. Not that they can't receive it. You're no good at it, right? Me and Dave talked about this idea of like, it's like throwing that baseball. Like you throw too hard, right? No one wants to play catch with you if you throw hard. And I'm not ready. I don't want to, like my 13-year-old, I don't want to play catch, or he's 16 now. I don't want to play catch with my 16-year-old if he throws the way he throws to his friends. I'm old, right? My hand doesn't do that no more. You know what I mean? My eyes don't work the same way.
Yeah.
I'm like, you need to play catch with me how I can receive the ball.
Great.
So
I love that.
if I can do that and I give feedback the way they can receive, they can play catch all the time. They can get a lot of feedback. If they don't receive it well or I don't give it well, then I'm have to space the kind of feedback I give and what I give. I have to space it out so that they can receive it. So I'm judging that, with them, and I'm asking questions in the process. Right?
really
Did you understand what I was trying to say? Do you hear my heart and what we're doing? Was that okay? Was that painful? We do that consistently. We don't just give feedback. We ask questions in the process, right? Okay, here's what I need you to grow on. Was that clear? And I ask questions honestly. I'm pretty honest. I ask questions like, hey, did I do that okay? Did that hurt you? If I hurt you at all, just let's fix that right now, because that would never be my heart to do that. Because often, especially when you're dealing with different types of people, you'll have to check in because you just can't assume, right? Because you're dealing with a guy who's potentially unemotional doesn't mean you didn't hurt his feelings. Or you're dealing with the girl who's potentially emotional doesn't mean you hurt their feelings. So tears don't mean they're mad at you, right?
Really?
Haley?
I cry
Right?
easily.
So it doesn't mean that. So you have to check in, and great leaders actually check into what they're doing. Hey, I threw that at you. Did you catch it? If you didn't catch it, go back and figure out how to redo it. That's the part we talk about. You have to adjust as a leader. Go back and figure out how to change that. That for me is a big deal. So how much, as much as they can receive within reason. I don't want to create the culture that every time I do something, someone's telling me how I did.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that either. That's painful because then you start to pre-analyze what you do. No one wants that either. So you want to create a culture of safety.
That's great.
That they go, man, I'm going to receive mostly positive. I'm going to receive some critical, but the critical is going to be managed in a way that I can receive it. And feedback changes over time.
Yeah.
So what I told Dave initially isn't what I tell Dave now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're much quicker with each other.
Much more honest.
Much more honest with each other. You know what I mean? That, now I'm like, that's killing me. Why are you doing that? And I might even talk to him in that slightly harsh, because that's me on a typical day. Not in general, but that's just me. Like, Flip, bro, what are you doing to me? And he's like, what are you doing to me? You know, and so that's a fun deal. But that's how I talk to a friend who's close. I might not talk to Haley like that ever. You know what I mean? Like I
We
manage
do, though, now.
what we do now. Yeah.
I had to, though, I'll just say this, as someone who does cry easily, I had to explain to Gabe, like, and for those of you who maybe are getting feedback from your leader, I had to explain to Gabe, like, hey, just because water is coming out of my
Yeah.
eyes doesn't mean you must stop. Just when you touch my heart, I cry. It doesn't mean I'm mad or even hurt. I'm processing deep emotion because this matters to me. And I actually have to say to Gabe, don't stop talking to me because you're getting emotion out of me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important as well as a receiver of feedback, is to be communicating like, yeah, I might be sensitive, but I actually want to be a great leader. And so we've
Yeah.
had those back and forths while I'm
Totally.
crying.
Oh, I had to learn that.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm pastoral. I think I'm nice. Dave might disagree, but I think I'm nice. So when someone's hurting, I'm like, oh, stop what you're doing. You know, what's happening? And Haley had to really. This is why you put great people around you, because you learn as much in you helping to grow them as, you know, in the process of growing them that you would. You know, does that make sense? Like you learn together, if that's what I'm trying to say. So Haley would have to teach me, like, hey, this thing that's happening to my face, don't let that distract you from what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to happen to my face almost no matter what you do. So deal with that. As a leader, deal with leading me. Right? She wouldn't quite say it that way, but that's how I had to learn it. Like, oh, I got to be strong enough to deal with leading that. Because it's easy to lead, you know, well, Dave's not easy to lead necessarily.
Like, wow, record this.
No. But sometimes it's easily people that communicate like you.
Yeah.
Right? It's difficult to lead people that don't communicate like you, because you're having to do the adjusting and I'm having to go, is that okay? And my heart, and I'm like, but I need to tell you these things, but it's painful, and then what do I do? And often leaders, when they can't manage that, they just avoid, right? And then you create distance, you don't create connection, and then you have people on the periphery that are supposed to be leading your environment that you just don't talk to because it's too painful. And you're like, I should be saying that, you know what I mean? But I'm not. Why? Well, you're scared. Let's be clear. You're scared. You know, you don't want to screw up. So you got to figure out how to get through it. You know, so that for me is kind of a big deal. So yeah. Ready? Next
Ready.
thing. We'll see how we do. Next thing. We'll do some sections here. This one for me, as we talk about this is just for some help for us as we lead. So we kind of break down people in teams. We talk about team dynamics. A lot of what we do is in team. We talk teams consistently because no matter what you do, you know, if you're a senior pastor, associate pastor, if you're a husband, a wife, no matter what, chances are you're leading in the context of a team, no matter what. And so, in a team, there's kind of different types of people. One of those practically is like we have workers, right? So we just plain. So workers, what do? They accomplish tasks. They spend resources. Workers get told what to focus on. They get told what things that they are supposed to accomplish, and often they get told how to accomplish those things. Workers do what they're told to do. Why I say that is because often roles when we talk about, they overlap, right? So there's moments, rarely do we get to have somebody, even in our environment, rarely do we get somebody who is like, hey, you're a pure leader. Like that's all you do is lead. I don't know anybody, maybe Bill gets to do the most of that, you know, but even then, like it's different. So in my environment, when we talk about I'm a leader, if we're not careful, you know, it's a bit like when we go, you know, I'm a friend of God. Well, yeah, you're also a servant and you're a slave. Can you remember all of those things? Because none of those go away because you're something else, right? So, yeah, you're a worker. There's going to be moments where you're going to have to do what somebody tells you. In the middle of that, can you do that? Can you accomplish the task that you've been given to accomplish because somebody else told you that you have to accomplish that? Yeah. That's a big deal. So we have workers. I would ask you, no matter what, no matter probably where you're at in your leadership, what kind of worker are you? That's going to determine often what kind of leader you are. Yeah. You know, if you're a lazy worker, if you can't accomplish things, if you're not driven to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, you're going to be challenged in your leadership, right? People, that's gonna like, you know, reciprocate itself on other people. So, what kind of worker are you is kind of a great question to ask yourself in in the moment, just ethically, right? What does that look like? I have kids right now that we're growing. Whew, this is a big deal. You know what I'm saying? This is a big deal. Why? It's not a big deal because I want them to be good workers. It's a big deal because I want them to be great leaders.
Yeah.
They don't understand that because they're 18 and 16 and 13 and 11. They don't get that. Cleaning your room is not because I want a clean room. I'm trying to create a responsible leader. I'm trying to grow a man. I'm trying to create a woman. I'm trying to create a father, a mother.
That's really
Do I care about your room? Kinda. Do I care about my dishes? Probably more than your room. I see them. Like, that's true. But it's not just to work hard. Hard work is going to reflect in how you lead and develop people. It reflects in your ethic. So often we go, I'm a leader, I get to pull away from the worker side. I'm like, no, that is not what you get to do. You should be the best worker in your environment if you're going to be a leader. So that for me is a big deal. What kind of worker are you is key, right? And then in that, we also have managers. Managers, what do managers do? Managers actually, that's our title. Each of us have that title in school. We're managers. So yes, we are leaders, but we manage things. Just because you're a manager doesn't mean you're not a leader, but you have a unique role when it comes to leadership that maybe, how would I say it? Pure leaders, if I can call it that, don't have. What do managers do? Managers know how to plan, budget, organize, staff things. They know how to control, sounds like a weird word, but they actually can control situations. And they know how to problem solve. This is what managers do. Managers deal mostly with how things are, right? The status quo. Management is a bottom line focus. So the question managers are asking is, how can I best accomplish a certain thing, right? How can I best accomplish that thing? Management is really about doing things right? It's kind of like a worker, except often you're not told exactly what to do. You have to figure out what you're supposed to do. And then it's, can I do the thing the right way? And managers typically are, in our environment, they're the people that really get it done, right? So they're the admin people. Probably is a much better way to describe some of our admin people. Is they're great managers. They might not even sometimes get the credit that they deserve, right? Admin sometimes takes a back seat to leadership in our brain, but that's not true. Management really is about doing things right consistently. If you're going to be a great leader, I think it's important to be a good manager, right? To go, hey, what things am I doing that are the right things to do? So the question would kind of be for me is in your leadership, if you're watching, is what kind of manager are you? The best way I can describe it, I kind of wrote this down. It made sense to me. Hopefully it makes sense to you guys is, let's just take actual managers. So people manage a store, right? You're a manager of a store. Well, that manager really helps to organize a store, true? But typically if you're a manager at Walmart, I would say, or, Target or one of these places, the employees serve you, right? They do what you want them to do. So that's one level of management. If you're a manager, I manage a professional athlete or I manage a singer, well, you there to serve the employee, if that makes sense. So you're in a service role, right? If you're a manager if you're a coach, they call baseball coaches, the head coach is called a manager. Well, there's give and take there, right? There's an employee-employer relationship. I would love to ask, which one are you? In your role as a senior pastor, as a leader, as a teacher, as a whatever, do the people that you lead, do they serve you? Do you serve them? Or is there give and take? I would challenge that. I think the optimal thing is to have give and take in that role. To go, hey, I'm there to serve you, and you're there to serve me, and we get to serve each other in there, right? I don't see that a ton, right?
You're so right.
I see a ton of,
So
hey,
right.
I lead, you follow. I see a ton of managers like that. It works, but there's no, often there's not a ton of buy-in to the organization or to the vision of the organization. It's, I work for a paycheck, not I work to accomplish something, right? The flip side sounds holy, but often those managers lack vision, right? They're just in service to others, right? I like the give and take, and I love the baseball analogy because they're not working for paychecks; they're working for rings. They're working for championships. We're working to accomplish something. I have a few friends that were professional athletes. NBA players and MLB players and stuff, and a few NFL players. I mean, granted, the paycheck is not horrible, right? But when you talk to them, they're not going to work for the paycheck. They're not working to win, it's not about Sunday's game or that game or whatever. All of those equal, I want a ring at the end of the year. All those
Yeah.
guys have one thing in common: get me the ring. And I think if we can develop a culture where our managers are working with the people that they're leading to go, hey, what are we accomplishing? What's the vision that the leader set? We want that. And that's one of those things at Bethel that I think we do decently well, is that the people in our level of leadership are managing what they're managing with Bill in mind, with Chris in mind, with Dan in mind, going, how do we serve the Father's vision? Because I want that championship at the end of whatever we do. And that's kind of a big deal for us. And then what do leaders do?
Can I just say, I think also it encourages creativity. I think when there's give and take,
Yes.
all of a sudden the people who could just be doing tasks, they're not being creative.
100%.
And when people are being creative, your environment is moving forward. And I think often when you're higher up in leadership, you don't always have time to be creating in your mind, but the people who are actually managing the tasks, when they feel freedom to influence and affect
Yes.
you,
Right.
they begin to create with you in mind. And I think that's what God does with us, right?
100%.
We so get his heart that we begin to co-create with him. And I think that is a sign of, always for me, I know I'm producing good fruit when the people underneath me are starting to co-create with the heart of the environment in mind. I'm like, oh, that is a sign that I'm creating a synergistic leadership
Yes.
connection, is that people are getting creative in my sphere. They're not just simply reproducing what they see, but now they're actually starting to shape things and mold
Yeah.
things with the environment in mind.
Yeah, there's give and take in the environment. And now oddly enough, now I'm not doing all the leading on my own, right? Now people are starting to go, hey, you could do this, how we could do this better. This is how we can accomplish that better. I have an idea about something. And there's that, I think that's beautiful. There is that give and take.
Can I ask you just on, because I think you do this really well as well, the kind of relationship between this is Bill and Chris's school and then they've given you second year. So it's
It's not my school.
Yeah, so I always remember, but funny coming from my background, when I first came on, and I would think of it as second year, you'd have an idea, and I would always watch you take that thought and go, but this isn't my like, you always had Bill and Chris's heart in mind in the way you make decisions, and your creativity had to fit within serving their vision versus just going, which you sometimes see as like, oh, you've given me this thing, sweet, I'm going to now do whatever I want. How do you, I don't know how you talk around that, but how you manage some of
how do
that
we
stuff?
talk around that? Well, again, it's a unique concept because we overlap, right? So I'm a leader and I'm a manager and I'm a worker all at the same time. So there's moments where Chris goes, do that thing I told you to do. Yes, sir. I will do that thing that you told me to do. Yes, sir. Right? There's moments where I get to manage their vision, and there's moments where I get to lead in my own vision.
Yeah.
But we talk about the role I play. The role I play primarily, while we teach on leadership, and I do lead my staff and all of those things, the role I play under a Bill and a Chris and a Dan is a management role, not just a leadership role. So when I first got my job in second year as a leading the school environment, I remember Mark Brooks, who I have lots of wonderful Mark Brooks stories. He leads first year School of Ministry along with Leslie. At this time, I think Mark was leading on his own. Mark pulled me aside. Now keep in mind, I had 6 years of youth pastoring under my belt and 3 years of pastoring in School of Ministry. So 9 years of pastoring, but I never led anything this big. And me and Mark were in first year together. So that's trivia for you. First year School of Ministry ever, me and Mark Brooks took it in the same class of like 30-something people. They told me to go to second year, and they told Mark, would you like to lead first year? That's how different we were, right? They were like, make sure you go to school, you need it. It's very valuable to you, don't skip second year. And they offered Mark the chance to lead all of first year, the class he just graduated from. And Mark's been leading ever since. He's a phenomenal leader. I love that man. But when I first got my job, Mark pulled me aside, just me and him, and said, hey, do you know why you got hired? And I said, no. I mean, I think Eric, who was leading before me, Eric suggested me for the job. I'm sure. Chris wanted me. I think Bill probably was okay with it. Those were kind of my answers. And Mark said, no. Do you know why you got hired? And I said, I don't, Mark. Please, you're going to tell me
Yeah.
why I got hired? And Mark said, you got hired because you think the same way I think. And then he said, and we think like Bill and Chris. Don't forget that's why you got hired. Your job is to think like them and to run the school for them the way they would run it. That's why you got hired. And so that stuck with me forever. That it's not, I'm under no preconceived ideas that people don't, let's be clear, right? People don't come to second year because, you know, Gabe or even Haley or whatever are teaching in school. It doesn't, Bill, you know, hopefully it's second year, it's presence, it's all of those things, right? But when they go to first year, no one knows who I am. Can we just be honest about that? There's no one that goes, man, I'm coming to first year because I want to get to Gabe's second year environment. No one's doing that, right? I'm managing what my leaders give me to manage. It's important that we have that filter. Otherwise, we lose the perspective of the vision that somebody else set.
Yeah.
And often where we derail ourselves as in our leadership as up and coming leaders is somehow we get too big for ourselves and we think we can create our own vision apart from the Father's vision.
Yeah.
And Jesus was really clear when he said, this is Jesus on earth said, you know what I do? I do exactly what I see my dad doing.
So good.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? I'm under no qualms about like, you know, what's your big vision? You know what I'm saying? And it doesn't mean I don't have it. I have vision. I like doing lots of things. But my first responsibility isn't to my vision, it's to the vision of my Father's.
Beautiful. So good.
That's what we have to do. And if I can do that, Bill says this wonderful thing. He says, like, if you can learn to serve, you know, the Father's vision, you'll accomplish not everything you want, but you'll accomplish much more than you could on your own.
Yeah.
And that for me has been true for me is that, no, I don't do everything I want to do.
So powerful.
I'm led by people that have lots of things happening. I do not everything I want. I've done much more than I ever thought I could by myself.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That is true. So, you know, so we learn to serve that way.
Yeah.
And hopefully, if we manage well, then we get a chance to lead. And what do leaders do? Leaders create and communicate vision and strategy. Leaders deal mostly with change, right? If you've talked to Chris lately, everything is future. Chris has messages on future, present, and it's not just, I mean, this is how he's wired, yes, but he's a leader. He's about vision. He's about change. Leadership deals with top line stuff. So if you are, if you're a manager and you're asking the question, how can I best accomplish certain things? Then leaders are asking themselves, what are the things I want to accomplish? Right? I'm not, in my role in leading school, that's a question I ask myself, but I don't ask myself this question all the time. The question I ask myself a lot is, what are the things Bill and Chris want to accomplish? So we're doing like a revival series right now in second year. We're doing it once a month. I think it's going to be amazing. It's pretty good, right? I initiated the revival series in a staff meeting. Kind of true. The truth is, Bill, out of a Q&A session with me and him in school, asked a question about revival. The students couldn't answer the question about revival. Bill turned to me in passing quickly and said, make sure that gets fixed. That was it. And then we went on to the next thing. My job is to make sure that gets fixed. So, while I can say, hey, I initiated this thing and I did this revival thing and man, I'm making room for my teachers to teach and do all that stuff. All I'm doing is taking Bill's vision, creating momentum on the vision and doing all that, right?
So good.
And the hard part is, and it's not hard, but it's one of the weird things about leadership is you'll get a ton of credit if, which I don't think is always a good thing, but you'll get a ton of credit for just doing the thing Daddy wanted you to do in the first place, And so, anyway, leaders are asking, what things do I want to accomplish? And if management is doing things right, leadership is doing the right things. And so we want to just do the right things
So
as leaders.
powerful.
That's what we want, right? And so I'm looking at Bill and Chris, and what they wrestle with on the day-to-day as I watch them wrestle with issues and stuff is their biggest deal, whether they do it right or not. And when we talk about feedback, we give lots of feedback. I'm in tough conversations with my leaders because we allow that in our culture. The questions they're asking is, are we doing the right thing, right? Chris doesn't care really, unless I screw up royally, how I'm managing an individual thing in school or what's happening there. You know, he wants to see my team grow. He likes, he likes that we help to produce a Haley. Like, those are things he likes, but he's not in the day-to-day in those things, right? The day-to-day for Chris and for Bill is, are we doing the right things? So Bill's going to ask me questions about school. His questions are not going to be centered around what are you teaching? His questions are we going after revival? Is the presence the main thing? It's those questions. Do whatever you want. Make sure that the presence is the thing that we are doing. However you want to do it, do that thing. And that's what leaders do. And Chris and Bill do a great job, and Dan as well, at creating the right vision so that people can get aligned with that. And my job often, and this is probably more if you're watching, for those of you that aren't the senior leader in your environment, is how can I best translate the vision that I've taken from the leader of our house, and how can I translate that into a vision that someone else is going to follow on my team? You know, how can I be in line with a vision that may not be exactly my vision? How do I really do that? How do I accomplish that? And so,
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
There? What do you do when you have that leader, and they've commissioned you, they've given you different things, and when you do have some different perspectives or ways that you think, oh, I can accomplish this, but it's going to be a bit different, or actually I disagree with something that they're giving. What do you do in those moments?
well, I mean, Haley, what do you do in those moments? Here's what I would say. Well, it depends on the culture that you've built, right? So I have lots of friends who are in those moments that have no room because the culture that they've either built or the church has built or they grew up in has no room, which is why we're doing this class. No room for somebody who's, maybe a manager in that way to talk to a leader to go, hey, I disagree with you.
Yeah.
That is not a problem we have here, to be honest. I wish I had a better answer, but, me and Chris spent an hour yesterday disagreeing with each other. And at the end of the conversation, we said, I love you. I love you. That was hard. And I saw him this morning and said, hey, that conversation, well, I will cry because I love our culture. I saw him this morning and said, oh, that conversation was so hard for me, Chris. I woke up at 5. I did not love that conversation we had. He was so kind in it, in that conversation. He wasn't mad at me. He wasn't mean to me. I just don't like confrontation. That's how I'm built. Chris feels more connected potentially in those moments, That's how he's built. So I have the ability to, even after a healthy conversation, a conversation that ended in I love you, to go back and say, hey, that one was hard for me. I didn't love that. I don't know how many of those I can have. I want to keep having them with you, though. I want to still be there with you, but I don't know how much I can do it. I just need you to know, but I love you. And in that moment, Chris goes, I wasn't mad at you. And I'm like, no, I know. Nothing to do with you. You did everything right. It has to do with me or my insecurity or my inability to manage that or whatever. It's me. But I'm just telling you as your son in this house, that conversation with my dad, that one was tough. Let's have it for half an hour next time. Or maybe not the whole hour, Again, our culture is built that we can do that. If you're not careful, you see our culture and go, well, Bill's a king, right? We would say Bill's a king and leads by decree. But that, if we're not careful, we if you don't think through it, you go, well, Bill's a dictator. He just says and everybody does. And I'm like, no, that's not true. That's not what we do. Like, we're free to disagree with our leaders in the environment. Now, it doesn't mean I get to do what I want, right? It means I'm free to say, hey, I don't agree with that. And if my boss tells me I don't care, and there's been very few moments that's actually happened, but I've had Chris a few times go, great, disagree all you want. Do what I ask you to do. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I don't quite know what to do when you don't have that level of freedom. Those are difficult places to be in. And if I would be honest with you and go, I don't have a great answer for that. Choose your moments of disagreement, manage that well. Even when we have, I'll just add, even when our culture is really healthy, it has a tendency to become unhealthy based off of its healthy core values. I'll give you an example. My kids, I give them freedom to disagree with me. That's good. I think that's good, right? My 18-year-old, however, on occasion, feels too much freedom to disagree with me. And then I got to go, no, I'm the daddy.
My 6-year-old.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you're the 6-year-old. I got to go, I'm the daddy. Hey, lest you forget, I know you might be bigger than me. I know all of that stuff. But out of our connection, I'm the daddy. You're gonna do what I say. You can disagree all you want. Disagree internally or with your mother.
Yeah.
But, and so even in our healthy piece, we have to manage how relationally connected we are in honor, because sometimes we get too comfortable in our own environment, right? And because Chris allows me to go, hey, allows not the right word, because our culture is set up where I can be like, I think you're wrong. Well, I have lots of ideas and I have lots of opinions, and I think lots of people are wrong all the time. That's, you know why? Because I think I'm right almost all the time. And if we don't manage that in our environment, then all we're doing is disagreeing all the time. Right? And so you have to pick and choose your battles in there. I don't know if that's probably a very poor way of
So
answering that
good.
question, but you got to figure it out.
Can I flip just
Yeah.
in that space? I think one of the beauties of being in this culture as well, sometimes obviously being led by Gabe, and this is if you're a leader, I think if you can do this well, it makes a huge difference. But Gabe and I will disagree about something, or we'll have a strong conversation, which again, we've been working together now for a long time. This would happen obviously with Hells as well. The three of us might go at it, and in the conversation we have go back and forth. And I might lead that conversation. I might say, I've had this idea, or I think this way, and Gabe and I might push back. And I might leave that conversation thinking, oh, well, I said my piece and he heard me, but he didn't feel the same way. You think, well, I said my piece. But then there's been times, not all the time, not every time, that'd be lovely if it was every time. But there'll be times then the following week we'll have a staff meeting and say it was my idea or Hel's idea. Gabe will, in front of the team, say, oh, we've had this idea, I've got this idea. And he'll share the thing that one of us brought to him and we bumped heads on the week before as his own, and so he's made in secret an adjustment and actually taken it on board. And in those moments, I don't feel like, hey, that was my idea. I feel incredible honor and a sense of, wow, I'm on a team. I'm being led by a man who might in the initial moment push back, but I can tell he's gone away and values me enough to actually then bring something to the staff. And so again, I don't think that can happen every single time he is the boss, he's the leader. But I think when you can do that as a leader, those moments that's happened is actually sent me a huge message, sent Hells a huge message where you're like, wow, this actually works. I have that space to engage with my leader.
And hopefully not to take credit for the idea, but really to adjust, right? I don't know, gosh, call whoever puts this video on and get them to pray for you, because I don't know what to do when you're around a leader who can't adjust. I don't know what to do if you're around a father who can't adjust. We just adjust all the time. That's one of we talked about these core things. That's a huge piece, right? You have to be able to have someone confront you and you change. I don't know what you do if you can't.
Yeah.
Or if you can only do it when your boss confronts you, when your leader confronts you. That's a poor leadership at any level. If you're a parent and your kids can't change your mind, what kind of parent are you?
Yeah.
That's really,
If you're not moved
really,
by the heart of your son or daughter,
Yeah,
what kind of
so
parent
good.
are you? If you're running whatever organization, a business, and your employee can't affect you and change you, I'm like, man,
Yeah.
it's you got some work to do. I would just say that,
Yeah.
if I'm really honest,
Can I just
Yeah.
one thing? I always think of kind of being the person also trying to be led, in this conversation. And I think something that's really important is there are moments when you're in a tough environment or you're having a tough relational issue with your leader, is you have to go back to, am I called to be here? Because God dealt pretty severely with sons that didn't cover their father when it came to Noah. And I always am in my heart in that moment going, is this a moment, Lord, where you're actually asking me to see the weakness of my mom or my dad? And you're actually saying, as a son or a daughter right now for me, is it my job to confront it, or is it my job to bring my strength and cover it?
Yeah, it's a great
Beautiful.
question.
And I think that's so important, because sometimes what we can start doing is we can create disconnection and divisiveness within the ranks, because we start talking to our brothers and sisters about things
Yeah.
that we're annoyed about instead of actually covering. And there's no environment that is perfect. Not one of us as leaders, not one of our leaders are perfect. And our role as sons and daughters, orphans will point out all the faults. But sons and daughters, they're part of a family, and they understand that when our family wins, I win.
Yeah.
And so I'm not just there to point out issues. I'm actually going, is this a moment to actually cover, and my strength is supposed to fill a gap here? Or is this my moment to actually confront and be clear with something? And I think that's really important as we talk about this, is some of you are called to actually serve someone who is imperfect.
Yeah.
And I say to the Lord, when I'm like, God, well, if you called me, then I will find joy in this. And that's not always easy. Sometimes I'm like, I'm about to find joy in something
very
that's
hard,
very
actually.
challenging. No.
It's true. I mean, it is true though. Like, I mean, I can say this extra a little bit. I pick me a little more leeway because I'm in the family, right? But like, we all love Bill, but Bill's not perfect. Bill's got things he does well, things he doesn't do well. That's okay. We all have those, right? I mean, he has less things that he doesn't do well than things he does well. But, you know, Chris the same way, me the same way, Dave the same way. But if you can create that culture of honor in your environment, which I think we have in this place, suddenly, no matter what level you're on, if you're being developed, if you're the one doing the developing, if you're a big leader, no matter what, we, like Haley said, we look for opportunities to cover, not for opportunities to confront. That's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for opportunities to confront. Confrontation happens out of growth, out of development, because we want that. But primarily what we're looking to do is how do we cover you, you know, on both ends of the spectrum. I think Haley said that so beautifully, you know, that my job as a son and Haley's job as a daughter is often to cover fathers and mothers. And so, you know, long answer to your question, but that's a huge piece, you know. And if you can't approach that well, all of a sudden you're, you know, you got bitterness happening in there, and you know, a little bit of arrogance and pride happens, and then, you know, and then God, you get pushed out, and you're like, well, what happened? You know, what happened to that? And I'm like, well, no. And you think here's the challenge. I watch leaders who can't manage other leaders, you know, sons and daughters who can't manage fathers and mothers, to put it that way, and then they're like, well, he pushed me out. And I'm like, no, God pushed you out. God actually says he resists the proud, gives grace to the humble.
So good.
God pushed you, not your father pushed you.
Wow.
You couldn't manage your father in humility. Do you know what I mean? And so
Wow,
you
that's
got moved
amazing.
out of a position, you got moved out of the grace that was on your life to lead. You know, somebody else took your spot because you couldn't manage how to deal with that father, how to deal with that
so
mother.
good.
That's challenging for a ton of leaders. You know, when it's often if you can be in that moment, you'll gain grace, you'll gain influence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the goal, actually, I think both Bill and Chris would tell you this. Like, I think the goal is to gain better leaders as you move generationally, right? So I don't know that any of us will preach better than Bill. I don't know that. You know what I mean? My hope is that, you know, somebody in our culture will at least be okay. But I think on the leadership side, as we grow, I mean, I hope my kids become better parents than me and Leah. You know, I know that Bill and Benny are hoping that me and Leah are better parents than them, you know, and that should perpetuate itself. And so just because you see someone above you, if I can put it in those terms, that has a problem, well, don't just run away from that. Be in the moment, cover them, make sure you don't have the same problem they have. Fix that problem in you.
Yeah.
And that way you don't pass that on to the people you're leading.
Yeah.
And guess what they'll do? If you manage that right, they'll fix the problem you didn't see that you had.
Yeah.
And they'll fix it in them. And then generationally, we perpetuate much better leaders instead of just saying, hey, I'm a big leader, I don't have a problem. You know, I'm perfect, you just serve me. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like
Yeah.
that.
So good.
Anyway, we'll do this last thing and then we'll just see where we go. Yeah. So there's different kinds of leaders. There's lots. You can kind of, you know, you can look these up. There's leaders who demand compliance. There's leaders who mobilize people. There's leaders who create lots of harmony. There's leaders who act through consensus. You know, there's really pace-setting leaders, and then there's kind of coaching leaders. I don't need necessarily to go through them all today. What I would love to ask, if you're watching, is, well, do you know what kind of leader you are? Right? Not like you have a style, you have an ability, you have some things you do well. You know, are you the do what I tell you to do leader? Are you a demand compliance leader? That's leader number one. Do you demand compliance? You know if you do that. You know if no one can influence you. Are you that kind of leader? Here's the challenge with that. You'll get results. You just won't get the best results. You'll gather people. You won't gather the best people. You know, you'll do stuff, just won't do everything that's in your heart to do. Are you the come with me leader? Are you the leader that mobilizes people toward a vision? You're like, hey, we're going that way. Let's go. Those leaders are often really great to work with. We have leaders like that in our environment. You know, I like in Banning Leapshire, who I used to work for. He's one of those. He's like, we have a vision. He's just vision guy all day, right? So we got a vision. Here's where we're going. Get on board or don't. But I'm leaving. You know, those visionary people are fun. Are you a leader that creates emotional bonds with people? Those leaders, people come first. I don't mind those type of leaders. Often the challenge with those leaders, those kind of affiliative leaders that gather people, is if you don't learn to extend your leadership lid a bit, you only gather a certain amount of people, and then you only influence those that you can have connection with. And that's kind of a few. It works well if you gather the right people. So if you're a Jesus and you can gather the right few, oh yeah, it's your money, right? But if you're not that and you gather the wrong few, then your influence is really diminished. If you're that kind of leader that builds harmony through emotional bonds, and Jesus was kind of all of these at some level. So, are you the democratic, through consensus leader? So those I think those always sound the best, but don't often work. But those are the what do you think leaders?
Yeah.
What do you think we should do? What do you think we should do? Sometimes it works, but those leaders don't often. If they don't often get much done, and if the wrong person's on your team and you're that kind of leader, oh man, you're in trouble, right? You're in trouble. And then there's pace-setting leaders, and that leader leads through high standards. It's the do as I do leader. Hey, you can follow me. The really high standards, I think, follow me as I follow Christ is one of those like, oh, sheesh, that's kind of a pace-setting guy right there to be able to do that. And then there's the coaching leader, which is, hey, why don't you try this? Leader that helps develop people for the future. All those are great, great's not the right word, but all those are models of leadership. I say that because you can have lots of different leadership styles and still be really successful. You don't have to have one thing that works and one thing that doesn't work. Your leadership is going to move through your personality. It's going to, how Chris leads is different than how I lead. How I lead is different than how Haley leads. Core values often all stay the same. So you're going to find similar core values in Haley, in me, and in Chris. But how we lead, how we translate those core values of the house through people are going to be uniquely different given our personality. So all that to say, I just want to give freedom for people to go read whatever book you want, read all the leadership books you want, but you're going to have to manage your leadership through you, through what God's doing in here. If you're constantly trying to change yourself, your internal structure, your personality to fit something, it's going to be really challenging to lead well. The best leaders find out how they're made, find out how God made them, and then maximize their strength in what God did in them. That's kind of the best way. Yeah. And all the sharp edges that most leaders have, find ways to knock those off, right? Because we all have those insecurities, those things.
Yeah.
And I would say good leaders do a few things really, really well. So good leaders, what they really do is they model, no matter what type of leader you are, you model the way really well. So you have the ability to go, like in my environment, I would say that my leaders that I have, we have 10 pastors, 9 pastors, whatever. I have them on there for this reason. I'm confident that any student I have can look at their revival group pastor, and I'm confident that I can say, be like them. And if I can replicate what's in them, I would come out with a great student, right? So great leaders have the ability to model what we're actually trying to do. Great leaders inspire a shared vision, not their vision, the shared vision, the vision of the house, what we're doing, what God asked them to do. I think good leaders often challenge the process. So when we talk about, the me and Dave or me and Haley or whatever, often what we're doing in those difficult interactions together is they're challenging the process that I have, or I'm challenging the process that they have. I don't know if that makes sense, but if we're not careful, we get stuck in what we used to do, or what seemed to have worked, and often we have to challenge what God is. What is God currently saying? What is He currently doing? Is he doing the same thing? Sometimes He is, sometimes He isn't. Does He want the same results in a different way? Often those are the things that we work to shift and adjust. Great leaders enable others to act. That's a big deal for us too, is that we're looking at leaders that lead any way you want, but you have to enable others to actually do something. You can't be it's not the one man show. Yeah. And I've seen a ton of cultures where it's the one person show, the one woman show. It doesn't create what you want. It doesn't create a culture that can replicate itself, and it's not sustainable, right? So and it's actually really painful. I've run into some great preachers, great leaders of churches, great pastors that have not figured out how to enable others to act. And the sad part is when they go be with Jesus, so does their movement, so does their church. They haven't enabled anybody else to take the baton from them, right? And so that's challenging. And I think great leaders encourage the heart, which, you know, that's probably a little bit bent toward me because I'm a pastor, but that's what I'm looking to do is can great leaders take someone from where they're at, encourage them to be, you know, everything God put in them, and then that's when they get results. And so that's what I would encourage you guys to do if you're watching today is, you know, we're going to do our best to you know, give away as much leadership stuff as we have, but I say encourage the heart because often we think leadership is a big room or a big group or a big movement, and often the best leader we can be is with an individual, with the one person. Jesus left 99 to go after the one, and so if we can work on, hey, can I encourage that one heart? Can I shape that one person? I remember Bill one day said, he's going to lots of these conferences preaching, and I asked Bill, why do you go to all these things? And Bill says, I'm looking for a person.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, you go to all these events, you're looking for one person? He goes, I'll speak to 3,000 people at a conference, and if I can find the one person that I can influence for his kingdom, the one person that will give his life to everything, the one person that when I look at him, I see that look in his eye, that fire that burns inside of him, that one person. He goes, I'll fly anywhere around the world to find that one person. I'm like, man, that's the kind of leader that I want to be, that I want to replicate, who I want. We have to get past leadership of this. It's a big event. It's a big room. The bigger, the better. Often the best thing you can do is find the one and value the one.